Hello everyone, this is meant to give you an overview of our RTI structure at Hopewell and what we're hoping to set up as a more effective protocol for helping those kids that are struggling at our school. So what is RTI? RTI, Response to Intervention. You may have also heard of SST, Student Support Teams. This is what we do whenever regular, high quality, effective instruction is not working for a student. There's 3 tiers to RTI, so we'll briefly look at what each tier looks like, what some interventions may look like, what our main goal is this year for RTI, and then what some protocols are that we're going to try to do to help us out. So tier one is what you do in your classroom. That is what is implemented by you. It is focused on the standards. So within tier one, that should be your highly effective instruction going on. This is when you do your differentiated instruction in the classroom to help that student out. Some of your initial screeners when you do Ames Web in your classroom or some of those pre-tests at the beginning of the year, this could also be used to figure out tier one instruction. Those formative assessments that you should be doing throughout the class should also help you to understand very quickly if a student is mastering the objective, and if they aren't getting it, then you know quickly you need to address. So now let's look at some examples of tier one instruction. Some examples could be mandatory tutorials, where those times that you set up, then kids could always show up for support. That could be part of tier one. Doing some small group support within your classroom. Having students go to the Hornet Lab for that more one-on-one support could also be a tier one intervention. Accommodations to classwork, if you wanted to chunk their assignments or give them mini deadlines, those could also be tier one interventions. Assigned seating or even preferential seating, moving the student to the front of the classroom or closer to your desk, that could be tier one. Giving some earned rewards for behavior, making some type of agreement with the student where if they get a certain number of positive remarks within a week, then they get a certain number of rewards. Having some discipline visual cues for a signal whenever the student needs to be redirected non-verbally. Having some conferences either with the student or the parent. Supplemental aids such as maybe math manipulatives or graphic organizers could also be a way to use tier one interventions. A peer mentor, our web program, and maybe some of those 8th graders being some support for the 6th graders, or NJHS members being some peer tutors for some of the other kids could also be a helpful tier one intervention. And then of course during our advisory time on non-reading days, you could also use that as a way to give some extra support to what you're teaching at that time in your classroom. So let's say with that time of tier one intervention, we are still having some struggle and need to start looking at tier two. Tier two, your goal is start filling in those gaps that the students are missing and some misconceptions in the learning. This is aligned to the TEKS, but it's not going to be at the rigor or the expectations. It's not going to be in line with the pacing of what's going on in your class at that time. It may be having to go back and fill in some places. This is usually taken in the place of maybe a class outside of your class. It could be Read 180. It could be a math intervention class. It could be if there's a interventionist coming and pulling out groups to come and work on things. It could be kids going to a social skills group during their advisory time. That could also be tier two. So some other examples, we said Read 180, Math Lab, going to Homework Hive with a specific goal in mind, if there maybe needs to be a schedule change to get them into those special classes, starting attendance monitoring, which is usually done by your administrators, grade report monitoring, where maybe the students have to start filling out a grade sheet, starting Reviews 360, where we do some data collecting on the students' discipline at the time. We could also set up a behavior chart where the kids have to get that signed by their teachers each class period. Some counseling conferences or even join some counseling groups. If it's a medical issue, maybe referring to Miss Mayfield. If there's any type of campus mentoring program that can help them, or if there needs to be an administrative conference or an administrative mentoring program, we can also set that up. So tier 3 is when we start considering special programs. So our main special programs are ESL and SPED, and if tier 2 just is not intense enough. So in the classroom, this usually looks like inclusion support and resource classes. And before you refer, there are 3 major things that have to happen. 1, your team of teachers must have a consensus with those concerns regarding the student. It has to be that you are seeing it as a team that this is a major concern. There has to be documentation of the interventions used with the student and the results. We have to have roughly 6 weeks worth of documentation of what has been tried and what the results are. And I'll later show you an intervention sheet, and then later where it has to be documented electronically for Round Rock ISD standards. And then last but not least, there has to be some type of documentation, preferably of a parent conference. If there's no way you can get the parent up to campus, then having that student teacher conference or team of teacher conference, but really preferably having that parent conference. So our goal this year is to really set up that protocol. We know what to do. Now we just set up the protocol for when we get those concerns. Setting up procedures for what we do when we get those referrals and when to review them, how to set up that documentation, even if it's starting on paper and later putting it into TAC, how to monitor the progress of a student that's in Tier 2, and then what do we do if a kid exits out of RTI, which is always the goal, and how do we monitor, how do we plan to watch those exited kids because we don't want to leave them behind. So just some references that are really fantastic are Round Rock ISD Response to Intervention website, and then a really fantastic behavior intervention website. A great intervention website, pbisworld.com. It has a plethora of examples of looking up target behaviors, seeing if that's the behavior you're seeing in the student, and then giving you Tier 1 interventions to try, Tier 2 interventions to try, and some sample documentation, some data collecting sheets, if you will. They're really helpful for behavior. They're really fantastic. So we've talked through all the theoretical stuff. So now let's get to, so what do we do when a student's struggling? What do we do realistically when I get out of my class and I'm going to my team meeting and and Julie over here is really struggling and we have got to do something. So the first thing we really have to start doing is we've got to start identifying some factors and start documenting. So one way to really start this, and this is a form that I will share with everybody, and this is a form that has been used in the past. So one suggestion is to start an academic support, a documentation sheet for that student. This was one that was used in the past before they went to TAC, and this is a way to start if you're not sure how to put things into TAC. So this is an academic intervention sheet where you can put what you're doing for the intervention, what type of what you're doing. For example, if you're doing small group, you put in here the number 3 for small group. So let's say this is an intervention support sheet for Julie, and our reason for intervention is math, and she really struggles with math. And we're going to start this September 10th. And the first thing we're going to try is small group because she gets distracted. So the result is she has an increase in her formative assessments by 10%. Well, now she's gone from making a 30 on her test to a 40. So now maybe on the 16th, I'm going to add that she gets that I'm going to have her have mandatory homework hive. And I'm going to send her to homework hive on Mondays and Wednesdays to get assistance with her homework and get a reteach. And the result is no change. So this is a way for you to document what are you doing with the student and what's happening as a result. Are you seeing any difference? Is there anything that's helping with the child? So this is a way for you to start on paper, but just realize that we do have to eventually put this into TAC. So let's say now it's time to go to TAC. So now we've gone to TAC and we've gone to interventions and we've clicked on classroom issues. So we get here and we start putting in the type of what we're doing, the location, and when you get to type, you will see things such as intervention for math, science, social studies, attendance, behavior, and you can put things such as, when you get to this page, you can put in things such as small group instruction and give more details, of course, than that. And then there will also be a part where you add the student down here. You will add which student you were discussing, and then there's the part for you to add some teacher actions. Okay, so this is where you put in whatever you put on your Tier 1 intervention sheet, you can add to this classroom issue sheet. Once you're done putting it in, and it doesn't show you on this because I don't have a teacher account, this button right here will turn into almost like a submit or save button. So you just want to make sure you update these classroom issues. Once you've gotten all of your issues in over time, you will eventually have a button that will tell you to refer it for an SSP or a student success plan. And that's once you've gotten that 6 weeks worth of documentation to refer, that you would go to that point. Just one more reminder, we do have criteria that we have to follow, district campus requirements for what we do for an RTI referral. And we do have to do 6 weeks worth of intervention before we go into any type of referral for special programs. And we also have to have a review of the child's cumulative folder, which can be found in Teacher Portal. And this shows you everything about the child from the beginning of time that they were in Round Rock ISD. We have to have those Tier 1 interventions that you put into TAC. We have the examples here that were on that sheet. We can start with what's on that sheet of paper, but what's going to be needed by our LSSP and by our district representatives is what we can put into TAC. And if you will need assistance with that, then we do have support on campus, including your administrators, that can help you with inputting that information into TAC. We are also going to need to know that parent contact information and what was discussed in that parent contact information, and that can also be put into TAC. Some other things on our form. We have, once there's things put in place, we do have to bring that referral to the RTI committee, which will most likely be the team of teachers along with the administrator and most likely a counselor and a representative from maybe special ed, or if it's a behavior referral, it might be a representative, maybe Miss Pollard or somebody from Focus. We do have to do a hearing and vision screen for everybody referred for a special program. We also put in a student success plan in eSchool Plus, which is where we put in the goals that we're going to monitor for Tier 2 and beyond to see where the student is, if they're showing progress or not. And then we will go from there with what we're going to do to help those children. Just a quick reminder, some examples of students that are required to have the student success plan and required to have the RTI process are going to be your ESL students that are active, that failed a class for the first 6 weeks, initial referrals for dyslexia testing, and then also students who failed STAR, that failed reading and math STAR last year. They also have to have, by state law, a student success plan. So those are students that you might see if you ever look up their data that they have a success plan with somebody that's supposed to be monitoring it on how they improve with the reading and math. So this was just a very brief review of response to intervention, just to let you know what we're trying to get accomplished so that we can make sure we support the kids the best way possible. We do have forms and we do have protocols in place so that if you do have a student struggling, we can put something together to help out that student. If you have any questions or you need to address a student concern within your team meetings, make sure you bring that up so that your administrator or your counselors, we can help you out with getting that paperwork and that documentation started to help that child to be successful.